Can you live on greens and sprouts, or do we need beans and whole grains?
I do not recommend cutting out food groups. I think it's actually dangerous. It's one of the pitfalls that people fall into when they're trying a raw diet. And the worst problem with doing these really restrictive, I'm only going to eat, only raw, only this, only that. The problem with or fat-free, zero fat, no nuts and seeds. The problem with that is that's where people have problems. That's where people go, I just couldn't do it. I wasn't thriving. Of course you weren't. You're cutting out essential nutrients. You're cutting out essential food groups. So I don't recommend that at all. I recommend balance. I recommend eating a variety of vegetables, fruits, whole grains, legumes, mushrooms, nuts, seeds, herbs, and spices in infinite tasty combination. Prioritizing the 6 daily threes, including some cooked foods. It doesn't have to be all raw, all cooked, get a balance, at least half your diet from raw foods, because there's benefits to raw foods, but there's also certain benefits to including cooked foods in your diet. So I like a real balanced approach. And I don't like the idea of being that restrictive where you're going to compromise your health. You really are. It is a compromising way of looking at diet.
What do you recommend for someone who has gastrointestinal problems?
This is a one-size-fits-all diet. People that have gastrointestinal problems, they've come to the right place if they're going to eat a plant-based diet. I still find myself horrified when someone comes to me after getting a diagnosis from their doctor of inflammatory bowel disease or IBS or constipation or anything, or diverticulitis or diverticulitis, and the doctor says avoid fiber. It's like, wait, no, we need fiber. That is the problem. And there's ways, if you're in a very acute phase of one of those conditions, there are ways to eat more gently on the plant-based diet. Like, you don't want to go from eating a standard Western diet and then boom, you're just going to eat Brussels sprouts and hummus all day long. You'll be miserable. You'll be in pain. So I always take my clients that come to me with these diagnoses, I take them where they are, like where they're starting from, and I improve their diet accordingly. Most of those people were not on a plant-based diet, and that's a problem. But I can't tell you how many people I've worked with that came with these acute flare-ups, and then they've avoided the flare-ups by changing to a plant-based diet, and they've healed their gut. It's, you're flooding your gut with the most health promoting things. Think about it. The gut is the primary host for the bacteria in our microbiome. We have them elsewhere, but the majority of them are in our gut. We are about 10 times, and I know this number kind of fluctuates, but we're about 10 times more bacteria than we are human in terms of how many cells we have. And we want those gut bacteria to be happy. Like we want to treat them right so that we can improve our health. We want to optimize our immune system. We want to optimize our cardiovascular system. Everything can be optimized, it seems like, more and more by taking care of our gut. What does our healthy gut bacteria love? Fiber, prebiotics. That's where it thrives. The good bacteria thrive when you eat fiber. And then the good bacteria get rid of the bad bacteria, and you promote this beautiful milieu where this very happy environment where your body can just fight off things and resist things and can basically be the warriors to take care of your health. So for gastrointestinal disease, for everything, it all starts with eating whole plant foods.
What is gluten? Who should avoid it? If you keep eating it, will you end up with celiac disease? Should we avoid wheat, oats, and barley since they have gluten? Are all other whole grains like quinoa, millet, amaranth, teff, buckwheat, and wild rice safe for a celiac patient?
So I did write a book called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Gluten-Free Vegan Cooking, and I did a deep dive in there. And gluten is simply a protein. It's a protein that is found predominantly in those products, wheat and all of the wheat derivatives. There's a lot of wheat derivatives and wheat products, and then barley, oats only via cross-contamination, not inherently, and rye. So it's such an interesting concept because it's been taken so out of context, like most things, and gluten-free has become this health haloed label on a food. And just because it's gluten-free doesn't mean it's going to be better for you by any means, because you can get all sorts of unhealthy gluten-free products. So it's not healthy. Let's just get rid of that. Just because it's gluten-free does not mean it's healthy. Let's talk about the people that do need to avoid it. anyone that's diagnosed with celiac disease, which is not caused by eating gluten, but it is something that if you eat gluten, you will have severe health issues in the long run, chronic health issues. It's hard to diagnose celiac. It's an autoimmune disease. It's a tricky thing to diagnose. You may not find out until later, but most people that have it will find out early on, especially if it's a severe form of it, because they're going to have some serious problems. It's going to be obvious. They're not going to be absorbing things. It'll show up. Not for everyone. It could be a mild one. So if you do suspect that, you go to your doctor and get tested for it. If you have an allergy to gluten or wheat or barley or oats or rye, which does happen, I had one of them myself. That's why I was compelled to write that book. If you have an allergy, you definitely need to avoid it. The interesting category that has broadened and gotten much more popular in the last decades or so is the people that are intolerant of it. So if you're eating, you'll know, you could do a test. You could test yourself, because what the myth is perpetuated by the idea that people say, I cut out gluten, I feel so great. Okay, well, what does that mean? I cut out eating all this bread and cookies and cakes, and of course you feel better because you're getting rid of these processed foods. It's not the gluten that was causing the problem, it's the processed foods, refined foods that were causing the problem. So you can do a real test to really know if you're sensitive, if you're questioning it. The hardest way to do this is to just do a food journal and start writing down symptoms and just try to pick it apart. And there's a real hard way to do it, a draconian way where you just cut out everything from your diet. You stick to rice and you add one food in at your time. I don't recommend that as the first line of defense because it's so draconian. But here's my test that I have my clients do. If they're suspecting a gluten intolerance or allergy or something like that, sit down with a bowl of barley, because barley, or a bowl of couscous, something that's a whole grain version of these foods, or farro, or something that's like a whole grain, gluten containing grain. Eat a big bowl, and don't have anything before and don't have anything after. Sit down and have a big bowl of it. I basically tested myself again recently because I'm doing my new cookbook and I wanted to see if I was still like this. And I just had barley yesterday and I've suffered. So it really does work. Yeah. So you take this big bowl or a bowl of one of those grains, you eat it. Don't do oats, because oats isn't always cross-contaminated. I would say barley or a wheat one. You eat a bowl of it. And if you're miserable like I was yesterday, you know you've got an intolerance and you could just cut it out temporarily. It doesn't mean it's going to be harmful, but if you suspect something more serious, obviously go to the doctor. The people that don't need to worry about this stuff are everyone else. So everyone else that's not celiac, allergic, or intolerant, enjoy a bowl of barley. My gosh, I wish I could eat barley. That's why I keep testing it, because I love it so much. Enjoy couscous, enjoy those whole grains. You want to avoid the refined stuff. You don't want to have a lot of bread. You don't want to have, sprouted grain bread would be the best kind of bread, but you want to avoid the processed foods anyway. Again, whole plant food diet, meaning not taken away. Every time you strip away those whole foods, like you're going to strip away fiber and nutrients, and you're going to end up more and more refined, the whiter the flour gets. So you want to go for the wholest grain possible. So you asked about the other whole grains, and those are all wonderful foods. Notice that in my 6 daily threes, this is where people get all kind of like, ooh, are you on the keto side? I'm not. I don't have whole grains in my 6 daily threes on purpose. Whole grains are fabulous. They are great for satiety. They are, oh my goodness, great for culinary diversity. You can make some delicious things with some quinoa and some wild rice, or all of those wonderful whole grains, or amaranth, all of them. But they're not unique nutritionally. They don't need to be prioritized. So if you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to reduce, not that whole grains are fattening. There's abundant evidence that whole grains are super healthy. Look at the Asian cultures where they live on rice. That's like 3 times a day they're eating rice. Around the world, the whole grains are staples forever that we know of. But they're not unique nutritionally. There's nothing in whole grains you can't get elsewhere. So it's not a priority for me with my clients. I want to make sure they're getting the legumes, the nuts and seeds, the leafy greens and cruciferous, the other colored veggies, and the fruits. So they're wonderful foods. They're not essential, but they're wonderful in a health promoting whole food plant-based diet.